How much does it bother you that Vice President Harris might soon, for political reasons, start to distance herself from your economic
She's not
plan?
going to.
It was reported earlier this week by Axios that Kamala Harris was going to try to make a pivot and distance herself from some of the less popular economic policies of the Biden administration, which is weird because last I checked, it was the Biden-Harris administration, right? And also, last I checked, I thought we had the strongest economy in the world. Why would anyone want to distance themselves from the strongest economy in the world? Where Fox News' Peter Doocy asked Joe Biden specifically, how's it going to make you feel when Kamala Harris distances herself from your policies? Look what he said.
How much does it bother you that Vice President Harris might soon, for political reasons, start to distance herself from your economic
She's not going to.
You don't think she's going to, Mr. President?
She's not going to. Well, there it is. I mean, is she stuck now, Akash? Is she going to be able? I mean, she's not that brilliant of a political maneuverer to be able to sort of figure this out and thread this needle. Is she? She's stuck.
She can't. She's the one that cast a tie-breaking vote on the two biggest spending bills that drove this inflation crisis, the American Rescue Plan Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. And after that first bill passed, if you remember, Larry, she's the one who barnstormed around the country saying help is on the way. And what help is on the way meant was that gas was going to cost $5 a gallon. So she cannot distance herself from Bidenomics.
I forgotten about that. They made her the point person to sell this thing across the hinterlands, didn't they?
The only thing she can do now is to create a policy platform of her own that is further to the left of Bidenomics. It's more Bidenomics than Bidenomics itself. It's more government regulation. It's more spending. It's more class warfare tax increases. That's the only space she has left on her economic platform. And that's what she's clearly going to be doing today and the rest of the campaign trail. And again, we got to make that campaign as conservatives feel some pain about it because it's going to mean fewer jobs, higher costs, more empty store shelves.
Foldy, this is kind of inside baseball, but I'm fascinated by it. You're on Capitol Hill. You know these reporters. You hear whispers in the corridors. How did this work out exactly? Earlier in the week, Jim Vandehei, Mike Allen, they're pretty well-sourced reporters. They're saying that Kamala is going to distance herself. Obviously, that was some kind of trial balloon. Then by the end of the week, Joe Biden saying, oh, no, she's not. How did this happen exactly? And was it a disaster or is it still being worked out?
Well, something to remember, I was on the Hill yesterday, but no other journalists are. They're all on vacation for the month of August. So they'll just take whatever garbage the Harris campaign is spoon feeding to them. And to the extent so that's how I think that came about is they needed a quota of things to hit. They needed some obvious clickbait, which this generated, and they want her to win. So that's how I think you get this kind of farcical idea that the vice president is running away from the president that she currently works with. But to the extent I think that she is running away from the Biden record, it is to the extreme left economically and to whatever Trump policies poll well. But the failures of Kamalanomics would make the Bidenomics record look conservative. I mean, what we were just talking about, she wants to forget, the Republicans saying that Kamala Harris wants to make America more like California. She wants to make America look more like Cuba and Venezuela. And I don't think that anyone in America wants that. Now, what I think it all will come down to, though, is voters being smarter than the journalists who are paid to proselytize for the Democratic Party. I obviously hope that that's the case. But let's just drill down a little bit more beyond economics-wise. I mean, Biden and Harris have both said that she was the last person in the room for all major events. Biden said he wants her to be like he was to Obama, the last person consulted. She has said the same thing. So let's think about what that actually means. So yesterday, for example, was the 3-year anniversary of the Taliban taking over Kabul. And how did they celebrate in Afghanistan? By staging a parade with the first world military that we left, that we abandoned in Afghanistan. She was the last person in the room for that. And obviously, I think everyone remembers the RNC, where the Gold Star family spoke about how Biden has treated them like dirt. Well, they've also noted recently that Kamala Harris has a cell phone too. She could call any of them at any juncture as well and say, hi, we wanted to end America's longest war for a 9/11 photo op. We're sorry that that ended up being such a disaster and cost the lives of your loved ones. She also has never said anything either. So if you want to look at the rest of the world, due to the Biden-Harris agenda, everything is far worse. And it all started with their desire to end the war in Afghanistan so they could get a fancy photo op on 9/11, 2021. She was an integral part of that by her own admission.
Yeah, it's a good point. And listen, she is the incumbent at this point. She and the idea that she's anything but the incumbent is ridiculous. She must run on the Biden track record. Patrice, we're also on the verge of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. And, one thing that the Harris-Walz ticket is trying to convey is that they want to get past all the chaos. They want to get past all of the anger and the disunity and division. It's time for a new dawn. It's time for new kind of politics. That's what they're trying to sell. And yet again, yesterday at this event, here was Joe Biden's message to the faithful.
Let me tell you what our Project 2025 is. Beat the hell out of them. I mean it.
Yeah, that wasn't an off-the-cuff impromptu remark. That was scripted. That was in the teleprompter. Do you think we're going to have a lot of touchy-feely, hold your hands, kumbaya next week, or are we going to have a lot of that? Beat the hell out of Trump, beat the hell out of Republicans.
Obviously, you're going to have it in the arena as well as outside of the arena. So inside the arena, you're going to have all of this brash, bold. I'm a John Wayne nickname. Tim Walz's nickname is John Wayne, and trying to be America's dad, who's abandoned MAGAnomics and is now back to his blue collar union roots with the Democratic Party. So we'll hear a lot of that bluster, I'm sure. President Biden is expected to speak on Monday, and then, unless anything changes, you'll continue to hear more of that. You will probably hear a lot on the personal attacks, Nate saying Kamala Harris versus Kamala Harris and the racism that's in a part of that. You're not going to hear a lot of policy. And then outside, I think you're going to be greeted by the jihadi supporters, the Gaza massacre supporters who are out there chanting death to America. I think it's going to be very fascinating to see how whether they even acknowledge on the main stage the protests that have been going on, whether they are able to throw a lifeline to those many Jews, American Jews, who feel like the anti-Semitism in their own party is swept under the rug as though it's nothing. And maybe they'll give a little bit of airtime to Pennsylvania's governor, Josh Shapiro, who should have been named on the ticket, but wasn't. So we'll see how that goes. But that's what I'm expecting next week.
Akash, we're going to kick things off on Monday with Joe Biden speaking. It'll be sort of his valedictory remarks, I suppose, and sort of the coda to his career, even though he is still going to be president for a few more months. So this is all very strange. At that point, though, are they going to be able to make this pivot? Will she be able to separate herself in some way? Will this, or will Joe Biden's shadow still hang over this convention?
No, I don't think it will, because they're going to want him off stage as fast as they can, right? As soon as he became a drag on the Democratic agenda, they quickly shuffled him off stage, and they'll do so literally, I'm sure, at the convention next week. And they did functionally the exact opposite with Kamala Harris. If you remember, Larry, when she was so unpopular that she was seen as a drag on the Democratic agenda, you actually got some pretty truthful and fair stories about her in the mainstream media, how she was a bad boss and people were leaving her office and how she needed to be reinvented and all this stuff. And the media was generally giving us an honest take on Kamala Harris because they had to, because they wanted to separate the Democratic agenda from Kamala Harris. But now that she is the Democratic standard bearer, you're getting things like that Time magazine cover that Foley mentioned, where she is just this absolutely heroic figure. And so you'll see, the heroicism of Kamala Harris on full display, and Joe Biden basically shoved to the side and forgotten about. But again, it shouldn't be forgotten that she cast the tie-breaking votes on Bidenomics. She's the one responsible for fixing Biden's broken border mess, who failed to do so. She was part and parcel of the Afghanistan debacle. And so they might want to push Joe Biden off stage, but Kamala Harris owns his failures just as much as he does, as do the Democrats running for House and Senate who voted for those things and supported them as well.
One last word for Matt Foldy, and I'll just be a little, this isn't beneath me. I want to make fun of her a little bit and her mannerisms on stage. Because listen, there's some people who think that Kamala Harris is fantastic and they love her style. There are others who just can't take it. And there is something about the comfort level of wanting to spend 4 years with somebody in your living room every day, right? Take a look at this moment from the rally yesterday.
Our extraordinary President Joe Biden. And he's going to speak in a minute, but there's a lot of love in this room for our president.
I don't know if she had a little afternoon Chardonnay before this event, but what's going on there, Foldy? It's almost like a Bill Cosby delivery, like the Jello pudding thing. What is that?
Well, I think it's also like a lot of the Hillary Clinton delivery of changing very obviously accents based on what you're speaking. I think that event, though, was in Maryland, so like not exactly rife with Southern accents here. But I think thinking about next week, though, much like the southern border, I think the porousness of the people who are outside burning the American flags and trying and holding Joe Biden's severed head in effigy, which I think the feds should probably be looking into, and the people inside, there's very little difference between a lot of these people. A lot of those jihadists are delegates to the convention, and they have made no secret that they are going to be causing some sort of ruckus. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think there's going to be a lot of unwelcome images for the Democratic Party. Obviously, thinking about 1968 when another Democratic incumbent was ousted by his party, and they had a DNC in Chicago with communists and anti-American rioters in the streets. I think the main difference between 1968 and 2024 in Chicago is now the city of Chicago is helmed by its mayor, who is a card-carrying member of the Defund the Police movement. So I think that rather than being on the side of the police, trying to stop the communists outside like they did in 1968, the mayor will probably be leading the communists and the anti-Americans and the flag burners and the Hamas flag waving people who are going to be in the streets of Chicago.
Yeah, I think it's a fair observation. We'll let it be the last word, but we certainly hope nothing like that happens. But you're right. The climate is ripe for it, and Chicago is exactly the kind of city that would accommodate this kind of mayhem. But God knows, we hope it doesn't happen. Everyone in Chicago next week during the convention will be in our prayers.